is what is happening in our markets sort of a result of sentiment versus fundamentals? And when I say sentiment, I mean a weakening Naira, and fundamentals, I mean high inflation. There's been a lot of debate between traders. What we've been seeing in our markets, is it sentiment or fundamentals?
I think it's a mixture of both, but mostly it's a lot of fundamentals from the foreign investor standpoint. We've seen, like you said earlier, we've seen a lot of capital flight from our foreign investors. We've seen a flight to safety. We've seen a lot of investors moving towards treasury bills and bonds, and that's the safer bet. It's a flight to safety by most investors. On the fundamental standpoint, we've seen the revenue targets for the country as a whole, Nigeria, declining. So that's definitely going to affect investor confidence. The questions they're asking is, can this government or can this finance leadership lead us in the right fiscal direction, and those are the key questions.
And I really want to discuss the damage this is going to have, the fact that we may not be able to reach our revenue targets in the next year, of course, because of softening oil prices. What is your take on how much damage this is going to have on our markets? And of course, keeping in mind that we're going to see federal allocations coming in this week as well. What is your take on how much damage it's going to have?
Yeah, as we know, 55% of our revenues for Nigeria comes from oil and gas, and about 26% comes from taxes. And the key in this issue is you see a rising amount of oil thefts since the subsidies were removed, and the government just needs to focus on ways to diversify our revenue base. There's so much pressure as oil prices are rising. Oil prices are declining globally, and this is affecting us in Nigeria. And so the government just needs to find ways to diversify the revenue base. It's very pitiful what we've seen, that a country such as Nigeria with such vast resources is focused 55% of revenues on oil. There's mining opportunities, there are opportunities in various spaces that we can definitely tap into and push up our revenue targets.
Now let's go back to sort of diversifying our revenue, where we can get revenue sources. Now, one of the solutions discussed was the government issuing bonds, more bonds, sort of to provide funds if we cannot meet our revenue targets. Now, on the other hand, we have the Minister of Finance coming out yesterday saying that she's going to cut our domestic borrowing actually by about 100 billion annually. And of course, she did come out saying that we've already cut it from about 1 trillion this year in 2012 to about 744 billion. What is your take on diversifying? Is that a solution, diversifying by issuing more bonds?
Diversifying by issuing more bonds could be a solution, but it all depends on what are the three reasons why, or the main reasons why these bonds should be issued. It should be to create employment. It should be to reduce poverty, and those are the key issues on the ground. What have the domestic bonds issued so far? What have they been used for? Have they been achieving their targets? And that's what we need to focus on. Of course, there's the sentiment that these bond issuances are taking credit away from the real sector, and that's really the key point that the government is trying to make, and just to open credit up to the private sector, and that's the goal. Yeah.
Now, certainly we know there's a lot of pressure on the government, like you said, to find more revenue sources, also to diversify from the oil sector, of course, to the non-oil sector. Now, we do have, we've heard reports that the CBN launched a 75 billion Naira fund for the commencement of NIRSAL, which, of course, is an agricultural project. Can you tell us a bit more about this project?
Yeah, NIRSAL is the Nigerian Incentive-Based Risk Sharing Lending Scheme. And the goal of this is to improve lending towards the agricultural sector. NIRSAL is going to have some major key roles to play in Nigeria's growth in the future. Agriculture is the key sustenance factor for like 70% of our population. So the government definitely needs to improve, and the banks need to improve their lending to this sector. They have to reduce the interest rates that are being given to farmers and people in the agricultural sector, people going into fertilizers. We need to reduce our dependence on importation of rice and of various agricultural products that we use in Nigeria. And I think this is a very key step in the self-sustenance of Nigeria when it comes to agriculture. I think this has to be pushed forward, and this definitely has to be improved.
Now let's sort of shift position, you know, from our agricultural sector, from our oil sector, and let's talk about another sector that's seen a lot of controversy right now, which is our aviation sector. Right after this Dana Air crash, we're hearing the federal government saying that they're going to restructure the aviation sector. I mean, is it too little, too late? Some people believe that. And really, what do they plan to do that they haven't, you know, already said they'd do before and not really followed through with?
It's not too little, too late. The aviation sector is a tough sector. I think most of the bankers and most of the industry people, non-industry people, don't understand the thin margins that are necessary and the high capital expenditures that are necessary to run an aviation business. The government should definitely be looking at some sort of government intervention and some sort of nationalization and some sort of bailout. There should be a public-private partnership that whereby the government works in hand with the private sector, and it could also boost our exchange. So you picture a scenario whereby the government takes an equity stake, a foreign partner takes a little equity stake, but the public takes the majority stake, thereby putting some accountability on ground for that sector. We've seen issues where the planes are faulty. We've seen stories whereby there's not enough technical expertise on ground, and that's why you need this three-way partnership, so it could come in, it could benefit the real sector of Nigerians, it could provide employment for people, and you know, it could also help the carriers on ground right now. You know, we know some of the major carriers, a lot of the carriers are using older planes, but we know some of the carriers are actually spending a lot of money and bringing in the expertise and buying the new planes and doing everything necessary to build a formidable airline. And I think the government should definitely step in and help this sector because it's a very key sector towards the growth of our country.